Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering IT with Cyber Resilience. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. I'm Keith Ward with Actual Tech Media, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this illuminating event. Before we get to the content, though, I do need to cover some housekeeping items to help you get the most out of this webinar. First off, we want your questions, folks. Put them in the questions box in your webinar control panel, which you should see right in front of you. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. Now, a browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we will provide further technical assistance. Next, check out the handouts section of your webinar control panel right next to that questions tab. There you'll find some great resources from Rubrik today, including a state of data security report, an overview of how Rubrik can help protect your data, and a link to the Rubrik Cyber Resilience event. Whew, that is a whole lot of Rubrik goodness, isn't it? So head over to that handout section and download those now. Now there you'll also find links to the ATM Decisions Group, which is a panel of IT decision makers that you can apply to join and participate in some more in-depth events and other special opportunities not available to mere mortals. There you'll also find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events just like this one. And finally, we've got a prize for you. At the end of the webinar today, we will be handing over a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you do have to stick around for the entire event to qualify for that prize, and it could be you. The official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found in the handout section right down there at the bottom. And with that, folks, why don't we get to the main event? I am totally psyched for this because it is my pleasure to introduce you to Justin Ruiz, a senior product marketing manager with Rubrik. Justin is ready to go, so I am going to turn to him. Justin, you now have the mic.
Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's year is off to a great start. It's really great to be here with all of you today, and welcome to our webinar on empowering IT with cyber resilience. So, with data, rapidly growing in volume, type, and location across the enterprise, protecting and managing data has become a real kind of struggle. The large and diverse states that organizations now present an ongoing operational challenge for teams because they now have more data to manage across more systems than ever before. And to add to the challenge, administrators that are managing these systems have been left to wrangle pretty much everything from physical systems, operating systems, virtual machines, databases, file systems, and even containers with either native tools or worse, data protection solutions that have some sort of legacy architecture. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we'll start by taking a quick look at the current landscape, exploring the key challenges teams face related to protection. We'll look at the required capabilities teams need to prioritize to keep their data resilient before finally sharing how Rubrik addresses each of these requirements and how we can help. Last but not least, we'll close things out with some additional resources that I think you'll find super useful. So a pretty packed agenda for you today. So let's dive in. Okay, so as you already know, these vital systems we operate run on one thing, and that is the data, which means if your systems are down, your business is probably down. And so in our first report from Rubrik Zero Labs, the state of data security, it found that 98% of organizations reported experiencing a cyber attack, which means your organization has most likely experienced one of these at some point in time. So it has never been more critical for organizations to get their environments protected and quickly restorable to ensure that your business can get brought back up online as quickly as possible. However, this is easier said than done. The I team's job is more difficult now than ever before. And it not only promises to get more challenging as the volume, the variety, and complexity of applications and data grow across the cloud and the data center. And so to protect these critical systems, organizations have historically turned to backup and recovery. And so what you can see on the screen is a common kind of environment that we run into. You have production systems, there's backup storage, there's copies and restores all over the place. But these approaches to backup and recovery, somewhat leave systems kind of susceptible to attacks. They create some kind of silos, and often they make it kind of difficult for IT admins and SecOps to work together to meet the kind of business objectives and to protect these systems. And one of the reasons for that is that today's admins are not only having to manage hundreds or even thousands of instances, jobs, backups, and all of the other kind of ancillary systems that make common tasks and administration possible, but now they have to increasingly worry about ransomware and other types of cyber attacks. And so as we know, the goal of ransomware is to deny you access to your own systems. And what are our teams in charge of? Well, it's the systems and the data that's contained within them. And so when ransomware attacks an environment in the backups, it's a really, really hard day to be in IT. And so businesses now need to respond faster than ever before and analyze more data to stay ahead of the curve. And this has resulted in applications needing more specialized environments for every use case. A typical kind of enterprise today has everything from physical systems, there's operating systems, there's virtual machines, there's databases, file systems, containers, and so on. And each of these systems can often have their own tools for the backup and restore process, along with the different business SLAs. And so dealing with this complexity is expensive. It can create those kind of silos that we talked about. And ultimately, it increases the risk that the critical kind of data that we're in charge of will be left unprotected. And on top of that, there tends to be no kind of global kind of visibility into all of this, making reporting and the other administration tasks super manual and making that transparency hard to get. And to make kind of matters worse, the data volumes are continuing to grow and they're growing fast. And that's kind of driven by the transaction volumes as well as just the simple kind of business needs for more insights. And the growth in data collection can be attributed to the increasing use of analytics. There's cloud migration initiatives going on, and even the proliferation of IoT devices. And so, for example, retailers now track more kind of data about each consumer, but at the same time, backup kind of windows and timeframes have remained the same or have actually decreased. And that's kind of driven by the need for higher availability. And so this means that backing up more kind of data and making it available for everything from testing and refreshes to operational recoveries. And unfortunately, with these legacy systems can often exceed the desired SLAs. But we also find that most of the time, organizations are unable to rapidly recover what they need when they need it. And so, for example, recovering a specific piece of data in a larger backup. What we find is that legacy tools are often restricted to all or nothing kind of recovery methods that just take a lot of time. And this adds operational risk that's often much more slow than what the company would prefer. And now, sadly, many IT teams are still using purpose-built backup appliances or secondary storage systems that are just susceptible to cyber attacks. And so simply put, secondary storage systems and purpose-built backup appliances, they can really just not satisfy the requirements of the modern data protection that's required. Most organizations still rely on insecure architectures that require loosely coupled backup hardware, software, and secondary storage systems, which creates a larger attack surface for the bad guys. And so imagine waking up to all your backups being compromised, and the backup software is incapacitated in some sort of an attack. The business is down, right? As you scramble to bring up the backup software and systems with any offline copy that you might be able to find. And all of these challenges are compounded as you add more types of systems to the game. And as you as we've already touched on, and as you already know, not uncommon for a company, especially at scale, to have multiple systems at play. That's going to be everything from physical systems to operating systems, virtual machines, databases, file systems, and even containers. And that's going to be across on-premises and the cloud. And so together, all of these challenges are having a huge impact on IT organizations. And we see it in the questions that we get from these teams. Questions like, how do I keep all of my data secure and available to recover in the face of cyber threats? How do I maintain a backup and recovery SLA when data volumes are increasing, but my backup timeframes are shrinking? Related to that, how do I rapidly recover only the data that I need, make it available to the users who need it when they need it? As well as, lastly, how do I centrally kind of manage the numerous environments across the cloud, as well as in the data center with ease? And so this is why at Rubrik, we believe there are a whole new set of requirements that organizations must have in order to protect their kind of data and systems in this new age. And so the first is, keeping data secure and available to cyber attacks. And so what this means is that these enterprises need a resilient and kind of integrated platform that delivers air-gapped, mutable, access-controlled backups that can be easily replicated and archived to multiple locations. But they also need to do this in an easy, scalable way. And so automated data protection is really the name of the game. And this is to ensure the data is always protected in a very kind of dynamic and changing kind of environment. And so organizations need policy-based automation that can discover, secure, and kind of manage retention of data in the variety of systems that they have across the org. And with all of these environments in multiple places, these enterprises need unified protection across cloud and on-premises. So that means that organizations need a single console to really manage the data, regardless of its location, the variety, or the volume, with ease and self-service from a single access-controlled platform. And with all of that kind of data, these enterprises need faster backup and restores at scale, because all of this data that is now being created, these organizations need smarter and higher performing backup technologies to deal with the larger volumes of data within a shorter time. So instantaneous recovery of data at any scale is a super crucial capability. Okay, but what about the restore side of things? After all, what good is a backup if you can't recover it quickly? And so enterprises need that ability to recover what they need when they need it. And this is the flexibility to restore specific kind of data or entire workloads en masse. And so as a company, when we started to talk about what Rubrik can offer and how we address these capabilities, a lot of this stuff is just ingrained into how Rubrik is built from the ground up. So we start first by talking about what Rubrik does to protect your environment. And now this is a really tricky one to answer in the sense that, it's not something that you can just go pull up and point at and say, oh, look, that's the kind of feature or the button. This makes it secure and available. It is really about our foundation and how, we built the platform in the first place. And so the fact that we built this purpose-built, focused kind of file system to provision or to store the data with immutability from the ground up with an air-gapped design from the ground up, we built security around it. There's role-based access controls and all these various things. It's just so ingrained into how the platform works that everything else that we do on top of it is just sort of natural and takes advantage of it. And so you have just this really strong foundation, and we are built to be this zero trust by design platform that every other operation that we do has that built into it. Then, we can start talking about the automation of the protection. And so Rubrik has this idea of what we call an SLA domain. And we'll get into this a little bit here as we dive into things, but the SLA domain is a declarative kind of policy. If we think traditionally how a lot of these tasks have been made, We're all used to creating some kind of schedule and setting them up to run at certain times and kind of having to balance all of that out. And that puts a lot of work onto, the teams. In Rubrik, we stepped back and said, look, we're going to redo all of this. Let's let the platform do all the heavy work. Um, let's let it do the work. Let's have the user tell us, what they need, and then have the actual platform will kind of work through all the details on the back end. And so the automation is built into the platform to the degree of zero trust by design that we were just talking about. And the automation is like, okay, well, we're going to do zero trust by design, but we also need to make it super easy for the teams who are using these tools. And so we're going to take the automation as far as we possibly can. And that's, again, if we dive into it a little bit more, that's where the SLA domain concept really comes into play. And so if we think about a kind of user of any system, we're going to say, the business knows, hey, we need to do backups on this frequency. We need to do them on a daily basis. We need to store those backups for a certain amount of days. And then we need to take all of that kind of data and roll it up into some sort of a monthly backup that we keep for an extra amount of time, or even some kind of a yearly backup that we can keep for a certain amount of years. And so, hey, we need to move it from the primary backup location, and we need to replicate it over to this other system for long-term kind of disaster recovery purposes. And we need to store long-term in the cloud because we want to make sure that we have that in case of a disaster. And all of these different things that, again, it's all stuff that we're used to kind of having to do the legwork on, but instead of now having to keep all those different pieces and parts straight, the Rubrik Security Cloud platform will actually control everything through these SLAs and the SLA policy architecture. Now, of course, the next thing is unifying the protection across the enterprise. And so this is one that gets a little tricky, but if we start to think about, okay, well, we know we back up this particular system a certain way, and maybe we have SQL agent jobs for that, but then we also have cron jobs for Oracle. We're using the RMAN scripts for that, and then maybe I've got another set of shell scripts that do all the different kinds of backups. Because the reality is, in today's enterprise, like we talked about, you don't have just one platform at play, right? You're usually having to support a couple of different ones. And of course, the challenge is, well, now we have different backup methodologies and recovery methodologies for these different systems. And so what Rubrik can give you is, by bringing all of this under the same hood, your backup and recovery processes all work the same. You create a single or maybe 3 or 4 kind of SLA domains across the environment for whatever kind of business rules that are applied. And then regardless of what you're protecting, if the policy says, I need this, Rubrik will call the appropriate APIs or job scripts or whatever you have to actually to be able to execute that in a way that each specific system can kind of understand. The additional piece of this, right, is now you also start to have a centralized kind of view, because Rubrik, because we're doing all of this work, we obviously we record all of this stuff. We can track it historically. We can give you reports and all sorts of kind of data on the execution of these operations, but it's all in the same platform. So instead of having to write, your own processes or use a separate tool for each environment to bring it all into one place, it's just built into a single platform. Now, the other thing here is being able to manage data protection efficiently. And this is very, very similar to that zero trust by design conversation we had earlier. So one of the things that we kind of took into account with Rubrik is the traditional way of backing up kind of data is you may take a full or a level 0 once a week, and then some kind of a daily, you take a level 1 or a differential. And then I've got my transaction logs or my archive logs or whatever your transactional history that we also have to store. And each platform does this a little bit differently. But when we sit back and look at how that's all being taken, the fact that we're doing those complete full backups of the data periodically starts to become a real strain on the back end. Because if we think about it, and if we're backing up all that data, every week, even if nothing has really changed, we're starting to duplicate what's being stored. And so with Rubrik, we said, let's see if we can implement an incremental forever approach, which if we just think about, it makes sense, right? We only should be backing up and moving the data that has changed. And so Rubrik is built into our processes, the capability to do these incremental forever backups, which means whenever we take a backup, the particular system thinks we're taking a full, depending on the system, and we're going to do some additional work behind the scenes to basically say, look, we should only capture the data that's changed and move that across. And then what we store historically is what you could call a synthetic full. But in reality, is we are taking that incremental data and we merge it into the historical data, and we are basically able to store the backups that you need historically without having to move all of the data each and every time. It's not something that I can just open up a window and point and say, hey, look at that feature, but it's so ingrained into what we do. It really provides a streamlined approach for customers. And the upshot of all of this is if we're moving less kind of data, we're storing less, but then we're also basically doing less work. And so back to something I called out when we were going through the current lay of the land, there's more and more stuff that we need to back up, and really there's just less time to do it in. And so now, because of Rubrik, we'll be able to only move all the data that's changed and be able to manage that change. And we're cutting your backup times down because we're only going to do work on the data that's had that change. And so it's a huge kind of benefit, and it's a really key kind of value add for customers that we see. Now, of course, the final piece here is the restore side of things, and being able to recover what you need when you need it. And this actually ties back to the automation again, because Rubrik can control everything. We know where everything is. We know all of the historical chains. Rubrik can then allow you as the user to pick a point in time, and then we'll kind of automate what you need to get you there. And so to go a little bit deeper, if we look at kind of the recovery screen that Rubrik has, you're going to see something like a timeline where you just pick a time in there and say, hey, I want to restore to this. And you, of course, provide, here's where I want to restore it to, and information about maybe where the files live or any sort of startup kind of parameters. But then Rubrik will do all the work for you to get it back to that point. All you have to do is pick that point in time, and then we sort of layer on top of this our functionality called Live Mount. Because one of the challenges when restoring is it could be a lot of kind of data transfer. It might be a couple terabytes. It might be 100 gigs. But moving all of that data across and landing on storage, there's really kind of two challenges with that. One, I need the time to move the data to get it across. But then the second thing, of course, is I need to be able to have somewhere to land it. And so I might have to go to the storage teams and work with them to create new disks or expand existing disks. Well, with Rubrik, now what we can do, depending on the system, is what we call a live mount, which instead of having to provision disks, because Rubrik, we haven't really talked much about it in detail, but Rubrik has its own storage and compute in a hyper-converged appliance. And we can use that to present your kind of data back to the system you're trying to recover. And this does two things for us. So first off, one, we don't have to go out and provision, any extra storage to do this. Now, you're not actually going to consume any additional storage on Rubrik. But then, of course, the second thing is because no data is actually moving across the network, writing to new disk, it can come up very quickly. And we're talking 3 to 5 kind of minutes, 4 terabytes worth of data. And so this becomes a very useful tool for you to rapidly get at your data. Things like, hey, somebody dropped 500 rows from a production database, for example, and we don't want to restore the whole thing. We just need that 500 rows back. Now you can bring up the live mount as a copy, and it's a fully functioning kind of database. You can use it for things like creating a reporting copy. Maybe you want to do test dev on it, some troubleshooting. And so it's a tool in the tool belt that you can use and gives you that rapid access to your data, and it can help you unlock a lot of different use cases. Awesome. So to start wrapping up, I know we covered a lot of ground, and so just to recap, as you've probably already experienced yourself, protecting these types of environments is no easy task, and with today's current landscape, it only promises to get more kind of challenging. However, the good news is that the Rubrik Security Cloud platform is here to help through the zero trust design, the global policy-driven automation, an incremental forever approach to backups, and lastly, kind of that global catalog for global kind of transparency and visibility, kind of coupled with the flexible recovery and live mount. You can keep all your data safe and readily available, so you can always recover, only what you need when you need it. And so Rubrik has a lot of experience with data protection. Rubrik as a company was founded in 2014, and has only really been selling for the last 8 or 9 years. And in that short amount of time, Rubrik has delivered purpose-built protection for everything from Microsoft SQL Server and the Oracle databases to Entra ID, and Amazon S3. And we see the trust and belief in these solutions with our momentum. And so I'm proud to share, that Rubrik is protecting data for more than 5,500 customers with a net promoter score of 84. Customer satisfaction score we see is around 98%. And we deliver all of this protection with a single, data security platform. And this is delivered, to customers big and small across all of different types of use cases and kind of markets across the globe. And they all trust Rubrik to protect these very critical systems. Customers like Carhartt, Home Depot, PepsiCo, and St. Luke's. And so as we start to close things out, I wanted to share a couple of final resources that I thought you would find interesting or helpful. The first is our report that I talked about at the start of the event, the state of data security, the hard truths. This report focuses on data security, kind of how it's changed, what it means, and how most organizations are grappling with it. And the second is a link to a collection of different assets that explains, how Rubrik makes your data indestructible, helps you spot threats, and facilitates speedy recoveries. And so these should be available to you in the resources section. Definitely encourage you to take a look. I think you'll find them useful. For those of you who want to go a little bit deeper and maybe even get hands-on, I would highly recommend taking a look at the Rubrik Explore kind of program. It's a collection of self-led product tours. There is a tour on Rubrik Security Cloud. This tour will guide you through the RSC or the Rubrik Security Cloud UI. So things like the navigation, some of the data protection dashboards. It will also take you through the global SLA domains we spoke about. And so you'll actually have the opportunity to create your own and even apply them to certain workloads. And lastly, it takes you through some of those zero trust capabilities that we also spoke about, including role-based access control and multi-factor authentication. And so just a great way to get started and to learn more on how to use these tools. In addition to these resources, definitely recommend and encourage you to reach out to Rubrik if you wanted to learn more. We would be more than happy to get in touch and share, how customers are protecting large environments. And we can even provide a personalized walkthrough for you if that was something that was interesting. And last plug here before we go, wanted to mention Rubrik has our Cyber Resilience event coming up on March 6th. This is an event that we put on in collaboration with Microsoft that will explore if your cyber resilience strategy is up to par to take on these new and kind of modern threats, as well as how to tackle and recover from some of these modern cyber threats while using the kind of latest in AI, which is very, very interesting and top of mind for a lot of folks. And lastly, on how to improve data security for different systems like M365 and Azure and other workloads. So promises to be a great event, and we hope to see you there. And with that, just a really, really big thank you to all of you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. With that, I'll pass it back to our host to close us out. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Justin. A fantastic presentation, really in depth. I think we all learned so much today about securing data and operations. I'm looking forward to that event coming up. A reminder that there's a link to that in the handout section as well. You got another minute or two to check that out along with the other rubric handouts before we are out of here today. Now, they are not able to take questions. Justin was not able to do that today, but be assured that any questions that you ask will be followed up on by rubric very soon. And with that, it is time to give away our $250 Amazon gift card for the event. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, you do have to be present for the entire event, just as with any of our Actual Tech Media events, to be eligible to win these prizes. And the winner of the Amazon gift card for this event is John Marchesano from Massachusetts. Congratulations to you, John. We will be in touch ASAP about getting you your card, so sit tight. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. Thanks to you, the attendees, as always, for being here, for your great questions, and for your interest in this topic. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. I had a great time. I hope you did as well. And we are done, folks. You can go get back to the rest of your day. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a great afternoon.